Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar titled Supporting Well-Being, Clinicians Becoming Social Resources for Health. My name is Francis Merrick. I'm the Associate Vice President of Certification and Credentialing here at ACSM. I'm excited to be your host for the session. As clinicians, have a unique opportunity to be social resources for health and support our patients and clients in making positive behavior changes. Today, we'll be examining popular wellness models and creating an awareness of our own biases for well-being. With this knowledge, we're going to provide better care and support for our clients and patients, meeting their psychological needs and enabling behavior change. For our speaker today's session is Erica Jackson, the Chief Coaching Officer for Wellcoaches Corporation. Erica has thousands of hours coaching experience and is a Master Certified Coach and National Board Certified Coach. She has also contributed to coaching research and co-authored the Coaching Psychology Manual published by Walter Kluwer. In today's session, we'll be covering 3 objectives. First, we'll summarize 10 models of wellness to create awareness of the clinician's understanding and biases about well-being. Second, we'll evaluate the impact of self-determination on the patient's ability to initiate and sustain lifestyle change. And finally, we will practice some key connection building skills for clinicians, such as team building, providing empathy, honoring autonomy, and building competence through strengths finding. By the end of the session, you'll have a better understanding of how to support your clients and patients in making positive behavior changes and becoming social resources for health. And we're going to get started. If you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat bar and we'll answer those at the end. Without any further delay, Erica, the floor is yours.
Oh, thanks, Francis. Francis and I will go a long way back. We've been working together for a while, but Wellcoaches and ACSM actually go back even longer. We really attribute ACSM to the reason that Wellcoaches was able to get launched, and this idea of health and now well-being coaching is part of the nomenclature now and really established as its own profession. So our deepest gratitude for your community in making this possible. Now, Francis mentioned that one of our objectives today was to practice key connection building strategies. Now, of course, since this is the webinar, you won't get to practice, but I will be identifying ways that you can practice those skills outside so that you can be a resource for well-being. So let's dig into this. The bottom line is that well-being needs to be considered through the lens of our clients. And I know some of you may be working with patients, and I'm probably going to lean into the word client today just out of my own habit. So we need to consider well-being through our clients' circumstance and their expertise, their own perspectives and biases and beliefs and values. And I want to call our attention to the importance of knowing that well-being is often rooted in circumstances of privilege and in life choices that not everyone has. So for me, well-being is about spending time in nature, walking through cornfields and wildflowers. It's a lazy Sunday afternoon on the porch with my family, sitting in peace and anticipating a home-cooked meal from my husband. And it's also enhanced when I'm able to spend time learning about folks from different countries and cultures and belief systems. And I also feel at my best, feel well and thriving when I've put in a long day at work. And when that workday has included walking on my desk treadmill or even taking a walk outside. Now, that's a pretty unique vision of well-being. And it may not have any elements that are part of yours. You know, it includes cornfields and wildflowers because I grew up in the country in a really sparsely populated area. And it includes Sunday afternoons and not mornings, as I actually happen to work on Sunday mornings. But I have the privilege of relaxing the rest of the day. And I have a home environment that includes a partner who can cook for me and the ability to buy healthy food. And I feel that part of my well-being includes being nourished by diversity because I grew up in a childhood experience where I had a lot of time being surrounded by other cultures. While if I had only experienced my own kind of small town white European culture, that may not have been something that I would have named. But I'm also somebody who seeks peace when it comes to my well-being because I grew up in a home full of violence. And I have the life circumstance that allows me to have flexibility and choice in my day, including when and how and where I work. But if I saw every client, through this lens and I expected them to want the same thing, I'd be doing them a great disservice, and I'd also be doing a disservice to our relationship and potentially harm to them. So I want to pause here for our first interaction, our first chat, and I'd love for you to tell us how you define well-being. And follow up with that, what influenced that definition for you? So what is your definition of well-being? And as you reflect, where did that come from in your own environment, belief systems, and the people around you? And there's no right or wrong answer here. The purpose of this is just to really prompt your reflection on what your own well-being is. So we'll give that a moment to take it in.
Some of the comments are coming in. Life balance from Jennifer. I'm checking the chat as it comes in.
Great, thank you. I'm not seeing those on my end. I'm sure there's a setting that would allow that, but I'll have you share those with me.
Another one from Gerald. True peace with oneself. The freedom to be flexible in my choices and explore those. This has come to my life experiences in many contexts. Another one is being flexible, open and positive, having a sense of peace and compassion for myself and others. My childhood is in conflict, and peace is important to me. My definition of well-being is freedom and having the opportunity to behave the way I want related to my values and wishes. And a couple other ones coming in. Emotionally and financially secure in a safe home where I can feed myself nourishing food. Being at the beach on a nice sunny day, relaxing in nature. This became my well-being because growing up I would go to the beach with my family a lot, and it always brought fun memories. And the last two here, overall state of being, the ability to handle life stresses, emotional, physical, mental capabilities, the art of living, paying attention to the 8 pillars of well-being and to the best of my environment, resources, and skills. For me, that includes nature and outdoors. There's a few others that are coming in, but look, that's pretty much the most of it.
Thank you, Francis. And I hear some themes around freedom and peace. That's interesting. And I love that nature is emerging more recently as a theme for well-being, with the recognition that not everyone has access to nature. They're in environments that don't include peace, and they're in situations that hinder their freedom. So what I want to name is that there is simply no right way for wellness. But I want to review some of the more prominent, standards or models, again, to help us reflect on what is out there in our space that's kind of telling us what's right or wrong, to help us understand more deeply what has shaped our own perspectives on well-being and how that might influence our expectations with our clients. So of course there's the World Health Organization's Thrive model, and this framework is organized into 3 clusters. So you see people, the kind of social, cultural environment, place, the physical or environments that are built around folks, and then third is equitable opportunity, which are the economic and educational environments that people find themselves in. And the World Health Organization posits that each of these clusters and the factors to the right of the cluster relate to health and safety outcomes. So when we have these things in place, both at the individual and the community level, people have a greater opportunity for well-being. Then, of course, there are the theories that are under the umbrella of positive psychology, a lot of them. Corey Keyes explored the difference between flourishing and languishing, and he has a really interesting quote. He said, I think that we set up an impossible task because our hedonistic version of happiness is impossible to sustain, but it's quite possible to feel fulfilled and content, and that the world is meaningful by aligning yourself with some ideals, something that's bigger and better than you, and trying to live up to it. So, he was really embracing the idea of having a big vision and having a deep sense of meaning and purpose to connect to our own well-being. And then there's something called the Values in Action Assessment from Martin Seligman and Chris Peterson. And that measured 6 key strengths, claiming that all the strengths are good, none is better than another. We're also able to improve on them intentionally, and that all of those, when they're being honored and acknowledged and used, contribute to our well-being. And of course, many of you are probably familiar with Barbara Fredrickson and her model of positivity. She named the 10 most common positive emotions: joy, gratitude, serenity, interest, hope, pride, amusement, inspiration, awe, and love. Now, not using the chat, I just want you to pause and notice if you're experiencing any of these right now. Pay attention to which of these might be showing up for you and where it might show up in your body, where you might notice that when you're feeling joyous. Where do you feel that literally? Now, these are wonderful positive emotions to experience. But can you imagine pushing someone to have a sense of hope, for example, when they've lived in an environment for their whole life where hope is hard to find and where disappointment is plentiful? Then we have the theories from motivation, from DC and Ryan. Autonomous motivation, where we're doing an activity because we think it's fun and challenging, or because it makes us feel good about our contribution to society or to our relationship or to our work, whatever it might be. And there's external motivation, which can engage us in a behavior, but we're doing it because we might feel bad if we don't. We feel guilty if we don't. We feel like there'll be negative consequences if we don't do that. So we support our clients in striving toward autonomous motivation and limiting the number of behaviors we're engaging in that are externally driven. We also have a bias toward SMART goals and encouraging long-term goals. But there are folks that we might be working with who don't really prefer to be committed to that kind of thinking. They may have trouble thinking about tomorrow, let alone the next year or the next 5 years from now. So that's something to keep in mind with our goal setting models. And then lastly, another model from Martin Seligman is the PERMA model. I'm actually going to be speaking about this at the summit in a few weeks. This says that we have well-being when we're feeling good, when we find flow in what we do, when we experience authentic relationships, when we have a purposeful existence, and when we're experiencing a sense of accomplishment. So now in the chat, I'm curious about which of these you've included in your work with your clients. Which of these are familiar to you? And you might even note the impact. You know, have any of these been helpful in your work with patients and clients?
Watching the chat.
Great.
Everything's familiar except for BIA and PERMA.
Okay.
Another person said they're familiar with all of them.
Great.
VIA.
Education at ACSM at work.
SMART goals and developing intrinsic motivation. Another just came in. Familiar with all, love positive psychology, exclamation point.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I'll say is, in order to engage folks in any of these related to positive psychology, there also has to be an acknowledgement of what may be hard, what may be challenging, what may be impassable in their lives. So we're not stepping over their feelings and real experiences. So
There's
just
two
a
more
few.
comments that came in.
Oh, yeah.
So this one really kind of connected with me also is I think it's interesting how you pointed out the goals aren't for everyone. The next two are trying to have patients find community as a great motivator. The last one is I've used motivation principles, goal settings, models via Wellcoaches, and probably elements of some others. And that was the last one that came in.
Okay, thank you, and thank you to all of you who are engaged in that way through the chat. I really appreciate it. So another model of well-being is psychological capital, and that refers to our own internal resources, the things that we have within us to help us manage through tough situations. This came out of organizational development work, and then was moved into work with individuals and their own sense of capital. You know, so if we're more hopeful and efficacious and resilient and optimistic, we're more likely to weather the storm, you know, either in an organizational situation or in a kind of personal challenging situation. That's another one that I'd love to give a talk on sometime. I imagine most of you are familiar with a self-determination theory. And this tells us that three things need to be in place in order for a person to be motivated to engage in a particular behavior. They have to have a sense of autonomy, which means, you know, being in charge of our own choices. They need to have a sense of competence, a belief that they can be successful, and a sense of relatedness, which refers to, you know, having a connection with another people. This is great news for us who, you know, who are working with folks. We can really tap into and support this sense of relatedness. So I'm curious, which of these you feel you spend the most time on in your work with clients? Honoring their autonomy, allowing them to be at choice, building their competence or confidence, or building relationship. Go ahead and just put that in the chat.
First one that came in is relatedness, and that's autonomy and relatedness. Building relationships and competence split. Relatedness, competence, building competence, autonomy, building relationships, relatedness, competence. I believe they all need to be pretty equal to build motivation. Relatedness, and for me it starts with relatedness and then autonomy. And the last couple that are coming in, relationship comes first for me and then others can come easier. High autonomy and competence, Relationships help increase interest in the part of the clinic. Relatedness and competence, a mix of all three is the last two.
Thank you. Well, I'm not surprised in the group that attended today that relatedness would show up more frequently than the other components. And yes, they do all need to be in place in order for someone to feel like they are, in the driver's seat. So another model, which will be unfamiliar to most of you, I imagine, is the multiplicity of mind model. And this comes out of psychology, out of the work of Richard Schwartz and internal family systems. And this is a belief that we are most whole, we are most well, when we acknowledge that we are made up of different parts of ourselves and that each part has its own talents and needs, and that at different times in our lives and through different situations, each part kind of steps up and has the loudest voice. So here today at lunchtime for me here in Ohio, I'm going to invite you all to go through a bit of a reflection and meditation. And we're going to do a roll call for each of these parts, and just invite you to take a listen to what those internal voices might have to say to you. And to frame this, I want to just invite you to think of a situation that you are facing right now where there's some conflict, an issue, an imbalance, an aroused emotion. And it doesn't have to be the biggest issue in your life, just something that's, as we say in coaching, kind of alive for you. And I want to just invite you to tune into these different parts as I walk you through them and pay attention to what they may be having to say to you. So close your eyes if you wish. You're not on camera. You could lay on the floor. Really, really relax yourself into this. And I want to begin with autonomy. This is the part of you that wants the freedom to make your own choices, the choices that serve your interests without interference from the outside. This part wants to be the captain of your ship and march to its own drummer and be authentic and free to make choices. And it's likely to rebel when others don't let us do that, or when others don't share our values, or when they try to tell us what to do. So pause for a moment and ask yourself, what is autonomy saying to you about this issue? And now let's hear from confidence. Again, keeping that challenge in mind. Confidence says, hey, I'm dedicated to being strong and competent and confident. I want to show off our knowledge and skill. And when this need is met, I can bring hope and optimism to this challenge. But if you don't listen to me, you'll have self-doubt, and that could lead to procrastination. What does that insight have to tell you about the issue or challenge that you have in mind? Next is the standard setter, and this is the part of you that says that you're responsible for setting ambitious goals, and you want to be sure that you achieve them so that you can shine and you can measure up to your own standards. And if you don't achieve, you might jeopardize your own sense of respect or fail to get validation from others. And this is the hard taskmaster part of you, the tough critic, both of yourself and others, for the purpose of avoiding embarrassment and letting yourself down. It's the part that makes you persist through the ups and downs to accomplish things. What is your standard setter saying to you right now? And now let's invite the body regulator to the conversation. This is the part of you that keeps you safe and stable and balanced, both physically and mentally. And to do that, it's down to earth, it's grounded. It values sustainability for yourself, for others, for the planet. It's the source of intelligence around the body. It's the part that listens to wisdom, the wisdom about what will work best for you. It seeks equilibrium, peace. What does this part have to say? Now the adventurer, that part of you is the fearless explorer, and it thrives on new opportunities, new realities, surprises. It loves to extend itself into the world and have an open and curious mind. It's inquisitive. It loves novelty. It embraces change and risk. It's curious. It is a vital resource for resilience. And so when things don't go well, this is the part of you that can help you recover and learn and adapt quickly. The adventurer has some wisdom for you around this situation. What is it? Next is that part of you that's relational. It's the part of you that wants to serve others, to put them first. You have a strong, positive connection with other people through this part, and you're able to help others thrive and perform at their best. You're able to be a team player. You have the know-how to build relationships and collaborations using your social and emotional intelligence. And for you, for this part, being loyal and trustworthy are a high priority. What can this part teach you about the situation that you're considering right now? All right, 2 more voices to listen to. Next is your creative voice, and this is the voice that generates, creates, invents. It's able to function in chaos. It can spontaneously find brilliant ideas just in time. It knows that, what got us here won't lift us above our problems. It's good for those out of the box approaches and innovations, and it also often has a good sense of humor. What can your creative voice offer you right now? And then the last voice to speak to is the meaning maker. Its approach is to stand back and tune in to your meaning and purpose. It zooms in to consider the importance of the small things, the small moments, and then it zooms out to find patterns and make sense of the larger perspective. And it nudges us to consider all those perspectives and to find the wisdom needed in the moment. It's important to this part to consider the greater good and to transcend the little things and ask, what's the larger lesson in this situation? It's the wise mentor, mature sage, and your own inner coach. So just take a breath and invite yourself to come back into this space, into this webinar. Think about what that exercise was like for you. What did you notice about each of those voices? Who stood out? Whose voice was the loudest? And which part was quiet and stepped back? Maybe you're noticing some different emotions emerged as you visited each of those parts. Take a moment to pause internally and think about what each of those voices was trying to say to you. And if you're willing, in the chat, just share one aha from that tour around your inner self.
Erica, there was one question that came in. It says, where's the
Yeah.
meaning maker on the wheel? I see executive manager not mentioned.
Oh, thank you. Do you see those two dots at the top of the wheel? It's supposed to say meaning maker on top of that. And the executive manager, oh yes. Well, I did mention the executive manager as the inner organizer, planner, strategist. And if I forgot to, I apologize for that. The executive manager is, it's the prefrontal cortex in your brain that keeps things organized on task, helps you, manage multiple demands. It's really good at creating order from chaos. So I will be sure to fix that graphic. I didn't realize the meaning maker was missing. Thank you. Such good attention to detail.
And
Any
also, Erica, at
ahas?
the end, I just noticed also I can unmute people towards the end, but let's go and keep it as keeping in the
Okay.
chat for now. But
Yeah,
at the
sure.
end, if you're wanting to open that up, we can certainly do that as well.
Yeah,
Watching the
thank
chat as well.
you.
I hear less the confidence, standard settle. Oh gosh, where did I just go? Standard settle, creative, and body regulator voices. Some of the voices seem to stand out more with the situation than others. Standard setter, confidence, and meaning maker, and relational are huge! Exclamation point. I also found myself when I was in the creative and curious adventurer, found myself wanting to apply these to other situations entirely. And the feeling in being in a good place can lead to complacency. There's another one that came in.
Beautiful. And as with each of these, there's no one right way, one right answer. We need each of these at different moments in our lives. They each serve their own purpose, and it's not a lens through which we want to force our clients to look through. But I also want to just provide you with a number of tools to allow your clients to say, hey, this is a model that really works for me. Scott Barry Kaufman has done a lot of work to update Abraham Maslow's hierarchy around self-actualization. And Kaufman describes or uses the metaphor of a sailboat, suggesting that growth doesn't come until we have stability and security. And that stability and security come from having a sense of safety, connection to other people, and self-esteem. So Kaufman actually in his model is acknowledging that it's not likely that somebody can engage in visioning or long-term goal setting until these basic needs are addressed. So that's really interesting to keep in mind. Now, of course, we also have well-being models for work. Wellcoaches has developed an inventory that we're just finishing validating that looks at well-being around mind, body, life, and work. You're probably familiar with the work of Gallup, and they've named 5 elements of well-being. That we like what we do every day. That includes career, right? That we have strong relationships and love in our life, that we are managing well our economic life, that we have good health and energy, and that we have a sense of engagement in our local community. That's a really interesting element that the Gallup includes. And of course, you've probably seen wellness wheels like this. This is an example from the National Wellness Institute. I'm sure, I know at Wellcoaches we use a wheel in some of our exercises. I'll just give you a moment to read through the categories that are in this frame that they've named as the 7 most important categories for well-being. And of course, medical societies like ACSM has exercises medicine, ACLM, ACLM, which is for lifestyle medicine, has its own model of well-being, which includes these 6 areas. And actually, they recently included social determinants of health, which I'll be talking about in just a moment. And we must consider that wellness has its own definition within race and culture and religion, among other things. So here you'll see that Indian Health Services includes culture and traditions in their well-being model. I just think that's so fascinating. And notice they also, at the bottom of this graph, include balance. And that's an element that I've not seen in others. In Singapore, the government has heavily focused on sport and motion as a tool for increasing the well-being throughout that nation. So they've shifted to fitness to highlight. And then we were engaged in a project in Baltimore supporting training coaches in an underserved area of that community. And this model had love, self-love particularly, as the foundation for wellness, focusing on love for self as a way to advocate for oneself in the community. So here's some questions to consider. And we won't chat around this, but I just want to have you take these with you. Now that you've seen all of these constructs, what might be missing in your own constructs of well-being? As you think about what well-being means to you, what is the strength of that model? How do you know, or how can you know, what your client's construct of well-being is? And how do you prevent your view of well-being from impacting how you coach, how you educate, how you work with those that you work with? So I want to name the social determinants of health. I believe that we all want health equity, and health equity is when all members of our communities, regardless of their race, age, income, culture, education, have opportunities to be healthy. Now, most of the causes of poor health and inequity relate to things that you see on this chart, the social and physical and environmental conditions around us. And those are referred to the social determinants of health, or SDOH. Diving deeper, these are things like income and education and employment and food and housing. And these are the determinants that influences of an individual's health and the opportunities that they have to be healthy. And so all of these models that we considered up to this point are wrapped in this kind of larger circle of the social determinants of health. Now, research shows that the social determinants of health can be more important than healthcare or lifestyle choices in influencing health. They impact 30 to 55% of the outcomes. Okay, so external resources, that wraparound that I've named, has a higher impact on health outcomes than the healthcare system. However, all of these models of well-being are also can be positively impacted by having positive influences. We can have positive influences by increasing social resources for health. And one of those elements is you in your individual relationships with your clients and patients. You can be a positive influence in the lives of others and be a resource for them. So I want to wrap up by saying how. First, you are a source of empathy. You can listen with a clear mind and be and be with that person, not with your checklist, not with the device that's in front of you, not in the conversation that you had earlier in the day that's still running through your head, and not with your to-do list. Find your own practice for clearing your mind of the clutter so that you can be a vessel for them to pour themselves into. And that also means letting go of your expectations for them and your needs for being attached to their outcomes. Let go of your need for them to succeed in order for you to feel validated. And love them, or appreciate them, or just be okay with them for who they are and where they are right now. So I just want you to bring someone to mind right now that you need to extend this grace to. Bring them into your mind. We can extend empathy by asking open-ended questions that encourage the person to tell their story and to learn from it. So we'll shift our questions from how did it go, or did you accomplish your goal, or did you finish your run, to what was the best thing that you did for your health last week? And what are you proud of? And what are you still hoping for? And what strengths did you use? And then lastly, you can repeat and reframe what you've heard from them through reflections, because reflections not only tell your client that you're listening, but it also helps them hear the message that they sent. And it gives them a chance to hear themselves through another lens and to have insights like, wow, I didn't realize that I felt that, or now that I hear it that way, let me rephrase it. So reflecting allows a deepening of their learning, and it also reduces your temptation as a practitioner to grill and to interrogate them for the purpose of them getting into action on your timeline. You can also be a resource for autonomy. You can support your client in discovering their autonomy, even within environments that have low resources. So center the conversations to support them in identifying the resources that they'll need to achieve. Acknowledge that all of the choices about the goals and behaviors are theirs and theirs alone. You're not assigning them to the client. You're providing strategies, and they are choosing which work for them. They are not accountable to us. I'll say that again. They're not accountable to us. We are not the authority over them. We are their thinking, and in some cases, their practicing partner alongside them, beside them. And we can be a social resource for them through visioning. So hold out hope, but don't ignore the real challenges that they might be facing, and don't be afraid to discuss them and ask about them and get real in the conversation. Hold them in positive regard. That's expressing empathy and support regardless of what they say or do. So hold them in positive regard, expect the best, and don't assume limitations. I want to encourage you to watch out for something called ecological fallacy. And that is when we assume that what is true for a group of people is true for an individual member of that group. Because no group is monolithic. Individuals within each group will vary as much as our fingerprints. Honor their vision and its distance. It may be closer or farther than your vision or the vision of your other clients. And remember to keep your own perspectives and beliefs and advantages in check. It's a bold, long-term vision that's full of resources and support systems may be really easy for us to consider, but for others, that vision may be just having safety the next day. It may be a dream of having just one person who they feel is on their side. And it may be just around the ability to buy food with their next paycheck. You are a social resource through building your clients' self-efficacy. Build their competence. When you're working together to identify goals, take the time to explore what it will take for them to be successful. Ask them, what are the internal and external resources that they need to have a win? And learn about their strengths. What are they good at? What do they enjoy doing? Where do they shine? What comes naturally? And build challenging and new behaviors based on those things. And lastly, be real. Be real. Build a relationship. Like I mentioned on the slide about visioning, acknowledge their realities. Give space in your conversations with them for them to tell you about their fears and their doubts and their uncertainty. And remember that what may be easy for you, like accessing healthy food or exercising outside in a safe space or finding time to get physical activity in after work, may be a near impossibility for some. So explore their limitations while also exploring and encouraging them to examine if those limitations are real or exaggerated. So that's part of being authentic too. And then take time to uncover resources. Become familiar with the resources and support systems that are available in your own area for referrals if your client is local to you, or support them in finding national resources if they're not local to you. And speaking of resources, here are some for you, which I think I can put in the chat. Let me try to do that. If not, I've put it in the chat, and okay, that just went to the organizers. Francis, if you're able to grab that and put it in the chat, I would much appreciate it.
Yeah,
And so
totally
with
do
that,
for you.
great. With that, I thank you. And to wrap up, I encourage you to consider your own lens for well-being. Be aware of the models that are out there that are influencing you and those that you might work with. Bring awareness to your work that those models are living inside the context of social determinants of health, and become a social resource of health and well-being for your clients. Thank you.
This has been great. There's a couple questions that are coming in, and I'm going to try to see if we can have them ask that live, if you're okay with that, Erica.
Yeah, sure.
First question is from Susanna Atkinson. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. Hold on one second. And let's see if I can do it. Oh, she's self-muted. Let's see here. I guess it's not going to work. I'll go ahead and ask the question for her.
Okay,
on this one, I think this is a wonderfully helpful of a complex family systems insight. What would you recommend to read or learn from, as I find it difficult? It's talking about complex family systems.
Well, I would definitely look up the work of Richard Schwartz and the internal family systems books. And you know what, I'm also going to take notes. Francis, do you have a way to communicate answers to folks after this webinar? So if I wanted to send along resources, we could?
Yep, you can send them here. And Susanna, okay. I think you are unmuted now. So if you want, if you had other questions, if you want to follow up with that.
Yeah, okay. I just want to say I have a number of books I can recommend, so I'll send those along around internal family systems.
That's absolutely fabulous, thank you. And also, I really, really appreciate this many different model approach that you have to wellness and well-being, because I was talking to somebody in the UK about a role for implementing health and well-being, and they very much were focusing on, well, you need to understand all the legislature, and it was mostly turning into just mental health. That's all they were interested in. And you know, that was just like you've shown today, just one of several pillars that are going to be contributing. So I wanted to know how to approach that to companies that seem focused just on mental health.
Sure. Well, if you're able to share a sampling of these models, and I will put these in the resources that I send out to the group. You know, there's evidence around all of these all of these models, and it is just so important to consider each human's experience, and that while one model may work for them in you know, in this year or in this decade, another model might really speak to them in another decade, in another set of life circumstances for them.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for being here.
All right, I have another one from Savion Young. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. You know, if you can, let's see here, trying to see if I can unmute you. Savion, if you have the question, you're available, you can unmute yourself. You should be able to now. Let's see, it's not, there we go.
Hello.
Savion?
Hi, Fabian.
Okay, how's it going? I really appreciate the presentation here. So my question is why do many people neglect the spiritual aspect of the full well-being model? I know that's one that a lot of people, I guess, shy away from because they think it's kind of religious or that kind of way. So why should people value that type or that aspect of the well-being, the spiritual part?
Yeah, and you noticed it's not in all of the models. It is in the model from the National Wellness Institute. We had a really deep discussion about this actually when we were building our own well-being inventory, and I think it is in some ways the semantics. Using the word spiritual can be a turnoff to folks who are atheists, for example, and do not believe that they need to access a higher power of any sort as part of their well-being model. And those same folks are comfortable if you exchange the word spiritual for the word meaning or purpose, or like connection to the universe. So what's most important when you're working with a client on any model that you might present is to invite them to label the components with language that speaks to them. It is just, there is no right or wrong label, only the label that speaks to them that will support them in having a conversation with you. And I think you're right, Fabian, that there are some models, particularly in the workplace, who have shied away from making presumptions around spirituality as critical to well-being. I hope that addressed your question.
I'm going to go to Kara Stone next. She had some insights here. I'm going to go ahead and unmute her.
Okay. Hi, Kara.
And then she has an insight and she had a question about one of your slides. Kara, if you can unmute yourself.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
I was trying to test it earlier, so I was like, hopefully my mic is working. Okay, so I thought it was just so interesting. I'm coming from an educator background, and so I've been thinking about a lot of these similar things. I also own my own wellness business, but I think that the parallels between like what people need to be successful in taking charge of their well-being is like so similar to what students need to be successful taking control of their education. So I thought that was really cool. And I just wanted to say that because there's so many areas of like human behavior and human life that these models apply to. And I thought that was really neat. But my question was just like, because I'm a slow note taker, that you had a list of questions after you talked about the models that we should be considering. And I was just wondering if you wouldn't mind like going back to that so I could see those again.
I will. I'm not sure if I can share again. Let me test that.
If you can't,
I will. You know what? I will be sure to share them with Francis so he can send them out. But just let me try for a second. Let me see if I can reshare. Oops.
as you're looking that up, there's a couple questions that are coming in as you're doing that on if the slides are going to be available, Erica.
Yeah, absolutely. I will make them available. I think I'm sharing it now, and let me just get to that slide. There.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, I'm going to go to the next person is Mohammed Bilal. I'm going to have you, let me unblock you. Hold on one second. Unmute. If you can unmute yourself, Mohammed.
Yes, hi.
Looks like you're good.
Hello.
Hi. I'm happy to be attending this nice presentation. I'm gonna drop straightforward questions for you. So, if there is any difference from your point of view between wellness and well-being, because we've seen this quite along that both terms has been used maybe interchangeably in the literature and in the clinical environments. So I would be happy to have your input regarding that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So Wellcoaches made a shift from wellness and certifying health and wellness coaching to health and well-being coaching just last year. And our drive to do that was to communicate a more holistic view of what wholeness is. And our sense was that the use of the word wellness, when clients thought of that, they thought more particularly around diet and exercise. And so we wanted to just shake it up a bit by shifting to the word well-being so that we can include all of the elements in these well-being models that we shared with you. In addition, health and well-being coaching got approved for CPT codes through the AMA. Those are reimbursement codes. Right now, we are at category 3, which is the research phase, but we're moving into, fingers crossed, category 1, which means health and wellness coaches with particular training will be able to be reimbursed in primary care. And those codes, the AMA specifically chose to use the term well-being. I hope, Mohammed, that gives you some understanding of the context and our logic.
And then there's one final question, and then I'll leave it for you some parting words, Erica. This one's coming from Lorraine. Unfortunately, she doesn't have audio on her computer, so I'll go ahead and read the question. I completely agree with using meaning or purpose instead of spirituality. Then allow she put PT, so I'm not sure if it's patient or participant, to interpret the meaning either through a higher power or personal empowerment. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
That is the last one that I'm seeing on my end. If there's any other kind of final questions, you go ahead and drop them in. But Erica, if there's any like kind of parting questions from you to this group, but this has been a great presentation.
Thanks, Francis. I really appreciate the opportunity. I think that last question just prompted another kind of skill that I would encourage you all to engage with, and that is, when you're working with your clients and asking them about their well-being, and you've asked them to maybe to name categories like spirituality and diet and exercise, be cautious to avoid making assumptions then about what that means to them. Encourage them to tell you what questions they would like to be able to say yes to around each of those categories. Have them define what each of those categories mean to them so that you are really clear on their own vision for well-being, and it's not through the lens of your own or other clients that you've worked with. Thank you so much, Francis.
Awesome.
And all. Thanks for being here.
the last one I got for you, Erica, is just
Okay.
like, it's a little bit selfish of mine, but can you tell me how to find out more information about Wellcoaches? And I know it's on the ACSM website, but how do I become a well coach, and where do I find more information about doing that?
Well, thankfully, our website's easy, wellcoaches.com. And we certify health and well-being coaches. We have a modular program, so you can take it at your own pace. But the most exciting thing these days about becoming a health and wellness coach, in addition to changing lives exponentially, is the ability to then take a national board examination through the National Board for Health and Wellness Coaches, which would then make you eligible for that insurance reimbursement that I named. So thanks for asking that, Francis. This is, I think, a really natural next step for your exercise professionals.
Nice work. Very good. All right, friends. Thank you for attending our webinar. Hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.